There are places you pass by every day without thinking. An abandoned building on the side of the road, a faded sign in the distance, a structure so empty, so lifeless, that your brain convinces you it's harmless. But what if inside those crumbling walls, something still waits? The Hollow Pines Hotel was once the pride of the mountains, a sprawling resort with a grand lobby, marble staircases, and rooms that overlooked endless forests. For decades, it was filled with laughter, music, and life. Families vacationed there, couples celebrated honeymoons, businessmen sealed their biggest deals inside its polished halls. But in the early 1980s, everything changed. The hotel closed suddenly. No official reason was given. The owners left overnight. Staff disappeared. Guests who had booked their stays never showed up again. Locals whispered about accidents, fires, even a plague, but nothing was confirmed. The only thing everyone agreed on was this: the Hollow Pines had become a place no one dared to enter. Windows shattered, roofs caved in, nature crawled back through cracked walls and dusty chandeliers. And yet, despite the decay, something about the building remained alive. People driving past claimed they saw lights flickering in the windows. Hikers swore they heard piano music drifting from the empty ballroom. And those reckless enough to step inside came back changed, or never came back at all. For years, the Hollow Pines has been more than abandoned. It has been waiting for footsteps in its hallways again, waiting for voices to fill its silence, waiting for you. Tonight, we'll uncover three terrifying stories from inside the Hollow Pines Hotel. Three encounters that prove it's not just an old building, but something far more sinister. By the end of this video, you'll understand why this place has been locked away in silence for decades, and why those who enter might never leave. Turn off the lights. Put on your headphones. And remember, if you ever find yourself near the mountains at night, and you see a building with broken windows glowing faintly in the dark, keep driving, because inside the Hollow Pines Hotel, the stories never end. It was the winter of 1994 when two teenagers, Claire and Jason, made a decision that would change their lives forever. The town where they grew up had always carried the legend of the Hollow Pines Hotel. Kids whispered about it at school, daring each other to walk past it at night. Everyone had a cousin, a neighbor, or a friend who supposedly heard strange noises inside, but no one ever stayed long enough to prove it. To most, the hotel was just another creepy abandoned building on the edge of town, but to Claire and Jason, it was the ultimate challenge. Snow crunched under their boots as they approached the towering silhouette of the hotel. The night was silent, except for the wind cutting through the trees. Their flashlights cast shaky beams across the decaying facade. Once grand windows were broken, jagged glass catching the moonlight like crooked teeth. The old sign, Hollow Pines Hotel, hung at an angle, groaning whenever the wind shifted. "Looks like it could collapse any minute," Jason muttered, trying to sound confident. His breath came out in visible puffs. "Then maybe we shouldn't go in," Claire said, hugging her coat tighter. Jason grinned. "Scared already? Come on, it's just a building. People tell stories to freak each other out. That's it." But Claire wasn't convinced. She had heard too many tales about missing hikers, about strange lights, about the cursed Room 6. Nobody ever said what exactly happened in that room. only that those who entered never came out the same. Some claimed it was haunted by a bride who died on her wedding night. Others whispered about a businessman who lost his mind there. The stories were endless, each darker than the last. The heavy front doors creaked as Jason pushed them open. The sound echoed through the empty lobby, bouncing off the cracked marble walls. Inside, the air was bitterly cold, filled with the smell of mold and rust. Dust swirled in the beam of Claire's flashlight as she stepped cautiously across the lobby floor. What struck her first was how much of the furniture still remained. The reception desk was still there, though toppled onto its side. A shattered chandelier lay in fragments across the floor, as if it had fallen only yesterday. Faded portraits hung on the walls, their subjects' eyes scratched out or hidden beneath layers of grime. It's like everyone just left one day and never came back, Claire whispered. Jason laughed, but it sounded forced. Yeah, creepy, huh? They wandered deeper, exploring the lobby, then the dining hall. Their footsteps echoed, making it sound as if someone was following behind them. Every creak of the floorboards made Claire's stomach twist. She tried to ignore it, telling herself it was just the building settling after decades of neglect. Finally, they reached the grand staircase. The red carpet was moth-eaten, but still clung to the steps, leading upward into darkness. "You know what we're looking for," Jason said, flashing her a grin. "Room 6. Claire hesitated. "Do we have to?" Jason nodded. "We came this far. Don't you want to know if the stories are true?" Every part of her wanted to turn around, but something deeper, a mix of fear and curiosity, kept her moving forward. Step by step, they climbed the staircase. The second floor was even colder than the first. Their breath fogged in the air as they walked down the long corridor. Wallpaper peeled from the walls like curling skin. Doors lined the hallway, most of them hanging off their hinges. The numbers on the doors were either missing or too tarnished to read. Then, halfway down the corridor, they saw it. Room 6, the door stood strangely intact, unlike the others. Its wood was dark and polished, though dulled with age. The brass number 6 was tarnished, but still clearly visible. Jason reached for the knob, but Claire grabbed his arm. "Wait," she whispered. "Do you feel that?" Jason frowned. "Feel what?" "The air. It's colder here." She wasn't wrong. It was as if a draft seeped from under the door, colder than the freezing winter air outside. Jason smirked. Only one way to find out. He twisted the knob, and to their surprise, it opened easily. No lock, no resistance. The moment they stepped inside, the atmosphere changed. The air felt heavy, pressing down on them like a weight. Claire's flashlight beam swept across the room, revealing a bed in the center, still neatly made. The wallpaper here was darker, stained as if with water or something else. A single chair sat in the corner, facing the bed. Claire's stomach knotted. The room felt wrong, like it was watching them. Jason walked over to the bed and pressed down on the mattress. It was firm, as if brand new. Weird. You'd think it would be rotting by now. Claire didn't answer. Her flashlight flickered, and for a brief second, she thought she saw someone lying in the bed, a pale figure, motionless beneath the covers. She gasped and stumbled back. "What?" Jason asked. "Nothing. I just thought I saw something." Jason laughed, but his voice cracked. "Your imagination's running wild. But then the door slammed shut behind them. They both jumped. Jason ran to the handle, yanking it, but it wouldn't budge. Great, he muttered. Must have jammed. Claire's flashlight flickered again, and this time she saw it clearly. The mattress slowly sinking, as if invisible weight pressed down on it. The indent grew deeper, until it looked like someone was sitting at the edge of the bed. Her voice trembled. Jason, do you see that? He turned just as the indent deepened further, the sheets pulling tight around an unseen body. His face drained of color. What the hell? Then came the whisper. It was soft at first, almost like the wind. But it grew clearer, closer, until both of them heard it. Why did you come back? The voice was low, rasping, and it came from right behind them. Claire screamed, spinning around with her flashlight. But the beam showed nothing, only peeling wallpaper and the empty chair in the corner. Jason pounded on the door, shouting. His voice echoed through the room, but the building swallowed the sound like a mouth. Claire's flashlight swung wildly, and she caught a glimpse of something in the cracked mirror above the dresser. Disfigured. It was tall, thin, its skin as pale as paper. Its eyes were hollow sockets, and its mouth stretched wide in a silent scream. But when she turned, the room was empty. Jason finally forced the door open, and they stumbled into the hallway. They didn't stop running until they burst back into the snow outside, gasping for breath. Locals later said they were lucky to get out at all. When asked what they saw, Jason refused to speak. Claire insisted the room was alive, that it knew they were there. And when Jason finally took off his jacket, claw marks ran down his back. Deep, red scratches, as if fingernails had raked across his skin. N01 has entered room 6 since. And those who stand outside its door swear they can still hear faint whispers drifting from inside. Why did you come back? Most of the legends about the Hollow Pines Hotel focus on its guest rooms, the ballroom, or the long, winding hallways where shadows move even when no one's there. But locals will tell you the real horror is not upstairs. It's not in room 6, or in the faded suites with broken mirrors and collapsed ceilings. That it's beneath the hotel, the basement. The Hollow Pines was built in the 1920s, designed as a luxury retreat for wealthy travelers. The basement wasn't meant for guests, it was for the staff. It held the boilers that heated the entire building, the storage rooms filled with supplies, and narrow tunnels used to move food and laundry without disturbing paying customers. But while the hotel flourished, very few people ever ventured down there willingly. In 1977, a man named Edward Harker was hired as the night caretaker. He wasn't from town. No one really knew where he came from. He was tall, thin, and carried himself with the posture of someone who had never been truly comfortable around others. His eyes were pale gray, always darting, as if looking for something no one else could see. His job was simple: keep the boilers running, check the pipes, and repair whatever broke in the middle of the night. Edward lived in a small, windowless room in the basement, next to the furnace. Staff sometimes brought him food, but he rarely joined them upstairs. Guests never saw him at all. At first, the other employees thought he was just shy, maybe a bit odd. But as weeks turned into months, strange things began to happen. Food went missing from the kitchen. Entire trays of bread, meat, even wine bottles. The maids whispered about finding doors unlocked when they were sure they had locked them. One cook swore she saw Edward watching her from the end of a hallway, only to blink and find the space empty. But the strangest thing was the smell. Guests began to complain about a foul odor drifting up from the basement. The staff dismissed it as mold or sewage, but the stench grew worse, lingering in the hallways, clinging to clothing. When asked about it, Edward only smiled faintly and said, "Old places always have their own scents." Then came the disappearances. The first was a young maid named Lily. She had been working the night shift, tidying the laundry room. When she didn't return to her dormitory, the staff assumed she had run away. But her belongings were still in her room, and no one ever saw her again. A few weeks later, a delivery driver came to drop off supplies. His truck was found parked outside the hotel the next morning, engine cold. But the man himself was gone. Whispers spread through the staff. Some blamed the isolation of the hotel. Others suspected Edward. He always seemed to know where everyone was, even when he shouldn't. And no one could explain why, on more than one occasion. They found him standing at the top of the basement stairs in the middle of the night, silent, motionless, staring up into the darkness. By the late 1970s, business at the Hollow Pines was already declining. The disappearances drove away what little clientele remained. And then, in 1981, the hotel closed its doors for good. When investigators searched the building, they almost didn't bother with the basement. But one officer, curious about the caretaker's quarters, broke down the rotting door. What they found made even the most seasoned men turn pale. Behind the furnace, hidden by a false wall, was a narrow passage. It led to a chamber dug crudely into the earth. The stench was overwhelming. Rot, mildew, something worse. And inside that chamber were piles of old clothing, shoes, personal belongings, and remains, bones, some animal, some unmistakably human. The chamber was littered with scraps of fabric, broken jewelry, and rusted buttons. All of it dated back decades. Edward Harker was never found. Some believed he fled before the authorities arrived. Others insisted he never left the basement at all, that he had become part of it. Over the years, countless thrill seekers have tried to find Edward's secret chamber. Few succeed, and those who do rarely return with proof. But they all tell the same story, the sound of footsteps following them in the dark. Not the echo of their own, but a second set, slower, heavier, always a few steps behind. In 2009, a group of urban explorers recorded themselves venturing into the Hollow Pines basement. The footage, shaky and grainy, shows the group laughing nervously as they descend the stairs. Their flashlights cut through the blackness, illuminating rusted pipes and mold-covered walls. At first, everything seems ordinary. Just another abandoned building. But halfway through the recording, they freeze. From somewhere down the hall, the sound of metal scraping against stone echoes. One of the explorers calls out, "Hello? Anyone there?" No answer. They press on, the camera catching glimpses of old furniture and collapsed ceilings. Then, at the end of a long corridor, their lights catch something. A man standing in the shadows. He is tall, thin, wearing what looks like an old caretaker's uniform. In his hand is an oil lantern, its flame flickering though no air should be moving. His face is pale, gaunt, his eyes sunken and wide. "Holy," the cameraman mutters, before the image shakes violently. The explorers scream, running back toward the stairs. The camera swings wildly, capturing only brief flashes of the corridor, but in one frame, just one, you can see the man again. Only this time, his feet aren't touching the ground. The footage cuts off as the group bursts into the night, gasping for air. They later swore the man followed them all the way to the exit, his lantern flickering in the dark to this day. The basement remains the most feared part of the Hollow Pines Hotel. Locals refuse to go near it. Some say Edward still walks its halls, carrying his lantern, searching for his next victim. Others believe the hotel itself consumed him, binding him to the walls, the pipes, the foundation, but everyone agrees on one thing. If you hear footsteps in the Hollow Pines basement, you'd better not stop to listen, because if you do, they'll stop too, right behind you. In the winter of 1981, the Hollow Pines Hotel was dying. The once grand resort had already lost its sparkle. Fewer tourists came, the staff had been reduced, and whole wings of the building were left unlit to save money. Rumors about the caretaker, the missing maid, and Room 6 had already spread through town. But the owners insisted everything was fine. It was in those final weeks that a businessman named Thomas Keene arrived. He was traveling for work, a quiet, serious man in his late 30s. By the time his car pulled up the icy driveway, night had already fallen. Snow blanketed the grounds. The glowing windows of the Hollow Pines must have looked like a beacon of warmth in the endless dark forest. Inside, the staff greeted him politely, though with an unease they didn't bother to hide. He was one of only 5 guests checked in that night, and the hotel felt cavernous and hollow, its ballrooms silent, its grand dining hall almost empty. They placed him in room 12 at the end of the second-floor corridor. The room was clean enough, though time had worn down the wallpaper and dulled the once bright carpet. The bed was neatly made, and an armchair sat near the window, looking out over the snowy forest. Thomas unpacked, hung his suit in the wardrobe, and set his suitcase near the bed. To him, it was just another stop, another night, another hotel. He couldn't have known it would be his last. The knock at around 2:30 a.m., Thomas woke suddenly. He wasn't sure why. The room was silent, except for the faint groan of the wind outside. He sat up in bed, rubbing his eyes, when he heard it. Knock, that it was slow, deliberate. Coming from the hallway at first, he thought it was another guest, maybe drunk, maybe lost. But then it came again, knock, knock. This time, it was closer. He slipped out of bed, heart pounding. He walked to the door and pressed his ear against it. The hallway was silent. No footsteps, no voices, only the faint hiss of the wind seeping through cracks in the building. Then, knock, knock, knock. This time, right outside his door, Thomas grabbed the handle but froze. Something deep inside him told him not to open it. His palms were sweating, his breath quickening. Whoever, or whatever, was outside. It wasn't friendly. He stepped back, staring at the door, as the knocking continued, steady, almost rhythmic. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. He waited. Seconds stretched into minutes. Finally, he climbed back into bed, though his eyes stayed open until morning. Vanishing the next day, staff noticed something strange. Thomas's bed was untouched, perfectly made, as if no one had slept in it. His suitcase was still open, his belongings neatly folded inside. But Thomas himself was gone, and no one had seen him leave. No taxi had been called. His car was still parked outside, covered in snow. The staff searched the hotel. They checked the dining hall, the lobby, even the basement. Nothing. It was as if Thomas had simply vanished. When they reviewed the security tapes, grainy black and white, footage from cameras installed in the hallways, they found something even stranger. At exactly 2:47 a.m. The feed from the second floor flickered, then went completely black. For 5 minutes, there was nothing. When the cameras came back online, Thomas was gone. The last frame before the blackout showed him standing in the hallway outside his room, staring into the darkness. The maid's story years later. A maid who worked that night finally confessed what she had seen. She was young, only 17, working her first job. She remembered the storm outside, how the windows rattled as if the wind wanted to get in. Around 3 a.m., she heard knocking at her door. Slow, deliberate. She pulled the covers over her head, pretending not to hear. But curiosity gnawed at her. She crept out of bed, opened the door a crack, and peeked into the hallway. No one was there. Only a trail of wet footprints leading down the corridor. They were bare, human feet. The water glistened under the faint light, each step perfectly outlined in melted snow. She followed them with her eyes as they stretched toward the far end of the hall, straight to room 12. But what terrified her most was that the footprints didn't stop at the door. They continued, faintly, up the wall. After the closure, the Hollow Pines closed only weeks after Thomas disappeared. His case was filed, but never solved. His family never got answers. But the story didn't end there. Over the decades, trespassers who dared to explore the second floor told eerily similar tales. Always after midnight. Always starting the same way. The sound of knocking. First faint, from somewhere far away. Then closer, door by door, as if someone were checking each room. One explorer swore he saw the handle of his door slowly turning, though no one was there. Another claimed he opened his door at the sound of knocking, only to find a man standing in the hallway, drenched, his clothes dripping with water, his face pale and expressionless. He vanished when the flashlight beam hit him, and the wet footprints, they still appear, leading nowhere, sometimes stopping in the middle of the hallway, sometimes climbing up the walls, just as the maid described. The legend today locals say Thomas Keene never left. They believe the hotel took him, swallowed him whole. His soul wanders the halls, knocking on every door, searching for someone, anyone, who will open. Some say it's a warning. Others believe it's an invitation. But everyone agrees. If you ever hear knocking in the Hollow Pines after midnight, do not answer, because if you do, you may just become the hotel's next permanent guest. Asterisk, and that was the story of the Hollow Pines Hotel. 3 terrifying accounts, all tied to one cursed building. A caretaker who vanished into the walls. A maid who left behind only whispers and shadows. And a guest who knocked on every door, long after his own was closed forever. But what's most unsettling is that none of these stories ever had an ending. There were no police reports that explained everything away. No logical conclusions. Just disappearances. And silence. The hotel itself still stands today, rotting in the woods, waiting. Some say if you drive out there at night, you can still see one light glowing in the second floor window, even though there hasn't been electricity for decades. Others swear they hear knocking as soon as they step inside. Soft, distant, but moving closer. Always closer. It makes you wonder, are these just ghost stories, or are they warnings? Was the Hollow Pines a place where tragedy simply happened, or is it a place that actively chooses its victims? The truth may never be known, but one thing is certain. If you ever find yourself walking past an abandoned hotel deep in the forest and you hear a knock at the door, don't open it. Now I want to hear from you. Which of these three stories chilled you the most? Do you believe the Hollow Pines Hotel is truly haunted, or do you think there's a darker, human explanation behind it all? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you enjoyed this dive into real horror and legend, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe for more terrifying stories every week, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next time we step into the shadows together, because this is only the beginning. There are countless haunted places, unsolved mysteries, and forgotten legends still waiting to be uncovered. And some of them might be closer than you think. So, until next time, keep your doors locked, your lights on, and never, ever answer the knock in the dark.